Welcome to Iron Sights. This podcast candidly seeks to create opportunities and deliver impact by sharing the experiences and wisdom of successful entrepreneurs and thought leaders who unapologetically aim to win in health, fitness, business, and life. I'm your host, Scott Howell. Welcome to Old School Meets New School. Tradition meets innovation, and imperfection meets excellence. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. So here we are at another episode of the Iron Sights podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me. Her name is Colleen Conlon, and she's coming to us from the Arizona region. She's Arizona-based currently, but she hasn't always been there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But Colleen is a coach that specializes in working with women, and specifically through strength training is a real focus for her, and also metabolic health, which is something we'll dig into a little bit today, and how she does that. Specifically, is she really focuses on kettlebell work, which I think is very unique in and of itself, but certainly unique to Colleen, and she has a really great story behind that. So we're going to talk about that. Welcome, Colleen. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. I'm psyched to be here right now.
Yeah, good, because so am I. I mean, you have a great story. There's several things I want to delve into today, and I think a lot of this is very relatable to me, which is why I was intrigued to talk to you, but also I think to the audience and to the clients and the customers that we work with at Red Dot on a daily basis, particularly for the women and particularly for the parents that have daughters, and particularly for anybody that just wants to feel, look, and live a more healthy environment lifestyle, because you've discovered how to do that and you're sharing it with other people, and that's what this is all about at the end of the day. So again, thanks for joining me today, and thanks for taking time out. You are a busy professional, and I respect that. So if you weren't here with me today and sharing time with me today, what would you be doing right now?
I would most likely be with a client. It's crazy. You know, I never thought fitness was going to necessarily be my career, and I've become very successmal with it. I'm currently a virtual kettlebell coach, which is something else I never thought was going to be possible until COVID. And my business has never been busier than it is right now from the room I'm sitting in.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that, but you weren't always a virtual coach. This just kind of happened in the light of recent circumstances?
Yes. And I don't think it would have happened if it weren't for COVID. And as challenging as it's been for many people, it's actually been an experience where my life turned upside down in the most positive way as it relates to fitness. And I'm very grateful for having this past year to switch things around and, you know, have a more steady income and a more steady lifestyle where I no longer have to run around Manhattan from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. Now I get to do everything in the comfort of my home. I get to help more people who are located in different parts of the world. I have clients out in the UK. I have clients on the East Coast, on the West Coast. And it's been a really remarkable thing that's happened this past year.
Yeah, it's crazy when you're given the space and maybe even a little bit of pressure at the same time to have to make a pivot. The stories that I've heard and some of the ones that have been shared here on this podcast, but some of the ones that haven't been shared yet about, you know, that are similar to that, and that, you know, the craziness and the insanity in some levels that I know I felt also gave me this creative space and purpose to do things that I knew I wanted to do, and I thought I always would do, but, you know, 10, 11 years into the business, I still hadn't done yet. And this, you know, again, the last year and a half or however long it's been now seems to be continuing to push those things in an amazing way. And, you know, there have definitely been some highs and lows and some ups and downs, and it hasn't all been comfortable. But at the end of the day, what I heard you just say there was you're impacting people globally, whereas before, while there are lots and lots of people in New York City, you're still limited, and you can only scale to a certain extent when you're showing up to a club every day and teaching to a class of however many people, which is kind of where it started with you, right? With the group fitness.
That's exactly where it started. I started off in group fitness. I went to college to pursue musical theater, and I I was really actually, you know what, can I back up? Can I tell you a story?
Yeah, please tell me the story.
I'm going to tell you a story. So I grew up, and I was not a small child, but I was not an overweight child. I would say I was a very healthy little chubby, but very healthy. And I didn't realize there was anything wrong with my weight until my best friend, Anna, in the 6th grade, took me aside one day and said, Colleen, everybody would like you so much better if you were skinnier. And then she took me into the bathroom and showed me how to make myself throw up with a toothbrush. My life just, it changed.
Wait, how old were you?
I was in the 6th grade, so like 11.
11, 12 years old. Yeah.
And I didn't know that there was anything wrong, but at that point, everything just, it changed. I was a pretty confident kid up until that point, and then I didn't want to be near anyone. Everything was just focused around exercise and counting calories and trying to be full. It was crazy. My parents used to tell their friends that their daughter was very disciplined because I would wake up at 4 a.m. 6th grade, I'd wake up at 4 a.m. to go onto the treadmill or the elliptical to burn at least 1,000 calories.
Wow.
Before I could go off to school. I started to develop really weird tendencies. Like I would drop down in the middle of class and do like 10 crunches before I could like go on with whatever the lesson was. I would eat less than 500 calories a day. Everything was counted out. And then the times where I really couldn't help myself, I would eat everything and then I would throw it all up. It was not fun by any means. I mean, I really thought that in order to feel worthy of other people liking me, I needed to be small. And what's interesting is I got really small. I probably dropped close to like 35 pounds over the course of that first year.
Wow.
And I stopped getting my period. I had my period at like a really young age. I developed a lot sooner than most other 6th graders. And like when I went back to school the next year, I remember one teacher came up to me the first day in the lunchroom. I didn't bring any food with me. And she asked me to open up my hand, and she poured like trail mix into my hand. And I was so offended. I remember throwing it up in the cafeteria and then running out crying because I didn't want anyone to think that there was something wrong with me.
Wow.
The teacher could like clearly see something was wrong. My parents, I don't even think they realized anything was wrong. And, you know, I had a pretty close relationship with my parents growing up, but I was very good at hiding things. Like if I was going to go and throw up, I would make sure to like tell my parents, like I'm having terrible menstrual cramps, and turn on the bathtub. So the bathtub water would like drown out the sound of myself gagging. My mom was a group fitness instructor. And I think she kind of loved the fact that I was getting into wanting to work out, and we spent time, you know, working out or walking or doing a class. And I don't think they knew anything was wrong. We also moved around a lot. So it wasn't abnormal for me not to have a lot of friends. I don't even think they realized that me and this girl kind of separated, but it was a struggle. And then I woke up one day, I was 17, and my mom took me to the hospital immediately. And within the course of a month and a half, I ended up having 3 abdominal surgeries. They had nothing to do with the eating disorder. But I had these 3 abdominal surgeries, and the first 2 were done laparoscopically, but the last one, they like had to make this huge incision across my bikini line. And I remember waking up, and I don't know if you've ever had abdominal surgery, but when you wake up from something like that, you do not feel like yourself. I couldn't walk by myself for about 3 months. And after all those procedures, there was no physical therapy that was prescribed to me. And I remember trying to work out. Again, working out for me was being on a machine, burning a lot of calories, or using light dumbbells, or doing a bunch of crunches and like supine exercises. And I remember trying to get back to those things, and I couldn't feel my abs anymore.
Yeah, just gone.
Yeah.
It's like there's a void, there's a hole that you can't connect with.
Yeah. So I started feeling everything in my low back, and it was very discouraging because that was one of the things that I thought was me. Like, I identified as like, I'm the disciplined girl who works out.
Right.
I mean, I'm the disciplined girl who has a terrible eating disorder, but I saw myself in the positive.
Yeah, but Colleen, none of that was being reinforced outside of the positive until the teacher that comes along and pours the trail mix into your hand. So just going back for a second, your parents saw you as being disciplined, and they were in a sense they're feeling proud, right? My daughter gets up and she works out, and this is the same type of behavior I have as a parent, maybe, but not recognizing the line that can be crossed, at least at that point. It's not aware. And look, as a parent who's been in the fitness industry his whole life, with a daughter who is, daughters that are involved in sports or in athletics, I know how gray that line can be and how quickly it can get crossed, unbeknownst to an adult who's never maybe experienced those things themselves, so is completely unaware of what the pitfalls of this behavior by your child can be. I wonder going back to when you were saying kind of when this behavior started and you have this friend who's influencing you, was there ever a sense in your head that you were not skinny enough or not good enough before this was suggested to you?
Yeah. So I grew up dancing, and my dance teacher liked to call me the elephant.
Wow.
I'd come down, like I didn't know how to control my body, and I would just like thud to the ground. So that was something set in my head. My parents did make comments to me about my food choices occasionally. I just love to eat everything. And I'm sure like there's something to that, because I don't think people just always want to eat. But as a child, I just wanted to eat all of the time. And I remember one time specifically, I was trying to have like a bowl of ice cream before dinner. And my dad made a comment about, why are you doing that? Like, do you want to become fat or something? Mm. So those are really the only 2 things that come up when I think about that. But no, that girl was not the first time. But hearing a comment from a teacher and then from a parent,
it's all being reinforced, right? And now this person has just validated all of this with, and let me show you how to fix this problem, quote unquote problem that you have. Let's just go into the bathroom. This will only take a couple minutes. And wow, obviously that type of behavior is every parent's nightmare. And at the same time, it often goes on for a long time before it's uncovered. So you just flashed forward a minute there, several years from, being a 6th grader to being a 17-year-old who all of a sudden winds up in the hospital for these abdominal surgeries. I mean, you covered a lot of ground. Was there an awareness that mom or dad had at the time when you went to the hospital about the eating disorder and the disordered eating? No.
And I talk about it here and there on social media. And I feel like at some point they must have seen a post at this point, but it's never actually been something that we've just found to have a conversation about.
Yeah, I think it's a hard one to have. I mean, and if you don't know, if you don't understand as a parent and you can't relate, all you want is for your kid to be safe. You just want your kid to be happy, and you definitely don't want to do things that push your kids away. That's going to happen anyways. I mean, when you're a teenager, you don't have anything to do with your parents as it is. So it's a really rough time in terms of finding your identity as a kid, right? As a teenager, particularly as a female, and particularly today. And damn it, you girls are mean to one another. I mean, savages, the stuff you say and do. I'm not saying it's any bad. I'm not saying us guys don't mess with one another quite a bit. I mean, it happens, but I hear and see, particularly on the platforms that are available to do it now, and the stigmas that are associated with, being overweight or not exercising or not being pretty or not being skinny enough, or not fitting into particular clothes or not being involved in specific groups or whatever. I see this stuff just exacerbated at such a higher level than I ever remember. And again, I was a 6-year-old or sixth grade boy who was going through different things than you might have been going through, but I certainly wasn't at the same level it is today. So you wind up in the hospital and you're having these abdominal surgeries. Was there an injury? What was going on there? Like, what from a health perspective created the need for surgery?
That's a great question. This past year has actually been a lot of trying to figure out exactly what's going on, but it was my appendix, and then there was an ovarian cyst, and then there was an abscess, and then they removed an ovary, they removed a fallopian tube.
Wow.
It happened within this month and a half of each other.
Wow. So what a traumatic experience for a 17-year-old, for a young woman to be going through that stuff. I cannot even imagine. And again, just going back from the parental perspective, I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be in that situation as a parent, having to watch your daughter going through all that stuff. So not only is what you've created as your identity, and your parents see you as this disciplined person who works out all the time, now all that's taken away from you. Yeah. Along with, there's things going on with your womanhood and your coming of age, and you're maturing and all these things. What's going through your head at this point?
At this point, I felt so lost. I knew I wanted to go to school for musical theater. Mm-hmm. I have a sister who's a year and a half older than me, and she went down the same path. And, she had her pick of what school she wanted to go to, what program she wanted to be in. And I didn't have that luxury. So in the midst of all that, there's a lot of comparison with sibling.
Yeah, that's an evil bitch, that comparison.
It's so hard. It is so hard. And if anything, it just made me want to stay closer and closer to myself. I felt like I really just didn't have any allies at that point. And that really continued into the beginning of my career, and it continued into college, just not wanting to be close to people and feeling like I was just never good enough for anyone else.
The imposter syndrome, yeah?
Yeah, it's really true. It's crazy because, I have this conversation with my husband a lot, talking about imposter syndrome. And I'm finally at this point in my life where I really don't feel like an imposter. Like, I feel very confident in what I have to deliver and share with the world. But, going back to this period of time, I was a mess. And I think it's just so incredible that kettlebells, a piece of iron, could just change a life so much.
So you have this journey, right, of you were doing sit-ups every day. Now you can't even feel your abdominals working doing a sit-up. Somehow you find your way into fitness again, and ultimately you make it a career. So I want to talk just about the surgery real quick, though, because I have to imagine even to this day, you're going to be challenged at some level, maybe muscularly and from a nervous system perspective in your abdominal region. Whenever there's that kind of trauma that goes on, and I think people really underestimate, a surgery could be fixing one problem, but it could be creating a whole slew of other issues that could become further. It's a sticky web, right? It's a sticky web, and I'm not a doctor, but I've been around quite a few of these and had them myself. And so I do understand that. So as you're finding your way out of your unhealthy situation or surgery and you're finding your way into fitness, what are you doing? Are you back on the treadmill? Are you, what's,
Yeah. I'm running all the time. And so I went to college in Manhattan, and I remember one night after classes, I walked by a Soul Cycle. And I go into Soul Cycle. I have a lot of opinions on this, but I remember the first time I walked past it, I was just like, I have to be a part of that. I take classes for 2 weeks. I audition because I think, how hard can it be? I had a terrible audition, but it gave me the fire to say, I want to be better than Soul Cycle.
Okay.
That's really how everything started.
So you weren't hired by Soul Cycle?
Oh, no.
So curiously though, what drew you to it? I probably have some guesses. I could maybe make some assumptions coming from the theater background, right? You're a very high energy person. You're seeing people having a great time. There's loud music, there's lights, there's, this sense of theater, for lack of a better term. And it's a hell of a lot better than running outside an NYC in the wintertime or even in the summertime. You're in an air-conditioned building.
You're in my head, Scott.
Yeah, so it's maybe I've heard that before. But yeah, so you fail at the audition, but you win because you're like, no, like I can do better than this. And they told me no, which starts a fire. So what next?
Yeah. And it's so interesting, this is like getting ahead of myself, but I remember after that audition, I cried, and then I sent them an email asking if they'd give me any feedback, and they didn't give me any feedback. And
wow.
I was even more upset. And like, fast forward, I ended up managing a studio at one point, and I had people asking me for feedback. And something I don't think people always understand with managers is, if you're working with a lot of people, like, taking that time to give all of that little feedback, it's not always possible with everything that's on your plate. And I remember just being so mad at Soul Cycle. And from there, I was dating a guy who was a trainer at Equinox, and he's now my husband. And he was really the first person that helped me to see fitness in a healthier than I had been treating it. And he was like, well, if that's not going to work out, like, why don't you audition for Equinox? So what do? I auditioned for Equinox, and they say no, because I had no idea what I was doing, but they accepted me into a cycling mentorship program. So my first year at fitness was just indoor cycling. And I loved it, but I got to the point where I was teaching 25 classes a week, and my body just couldn't take it anymore. Hello. My body just couldn't take it anymore. And my husband's like grabbing the fitness stuff. Oh
yeah, no, I see you were in the studio. I mean, you're in the family gym, for God's sakes. I mean,
my body couldn't take it anymore. So I was like, you know what? I need to start doing like group fitness classes. Like, that'll be so much better. So I'm spending half of my time on a bike, and then I'm spending the other half teaching people how to do burpees.
Yeah, right.
And my body was just a mess. And one of the things that they really encourage you to do is take other people's classes. So I remember walking into a group fitness class one day, and the instructor calls me out because the weights I pick are apparently too light. And I remember going through this class just feeling all of this terrible pain in my low back. And it was just the most discouraging situation. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with group fitness right now. I'm going to try the personal training route. So I leave Equinox, and then I actually start training at my husband's gym outside of the city. Mm-hmm. And everything is just very different. It no longer feels like this big elaborate performance. And I realized that I really didn't know anything other than BPMs and saying 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Yeah, I think that's again, I've used this term a couple times now, but common tale. I think for the general consumer, they see their quote unquote coach at whatever you mentioned, Soul Cycle as being one of those, and they're looking at, hey, my coach does this and my coach does that, and they inspire me to do these things and so forth, or some other form of group exercise. But the reality of it is if you put that person into a situation where they had to individually like assess, evaluate, program, encourage, motivate, and continue a customized program for somebody, the term coaching changes dramatically. And I watch a lot of coaches that maybe come from the environment that you're talking about try to step into the world. Well, I've got all these quote unquote fans or followers or people that want to be trained or coached by me, but they walk into a situation they're very disillusioned with. They don't really understand. So what are like the big eye-opening things for you that happen transitioning from the world of group exercise into personal training? I mean, you said one of them, you didn't know what you didn't know, but what are some of those things?
I remember, so my husband's boss asked me day one, you're going to put me through an assessment. I was
What's that? Right.
so lost. Having people actually say I have an injury and trying to figure out how to program around it. Those were all things that like you didn't really have to worry about in a group fitness class. It's so rare, even in a group fitness class, where somebody's like, I have this injury. Most people, like if there's something that rough going on, they don't go to class, or at least, within that first year and a half where I was teaching, I didn't really encounter that stuff. It's interesting though, because if we fast forward, I did end up going back to group fitness and doing a combination of personal training and group. And I think people felt a lot more comfortable opening up to me with the injuries they had. And that goes into play again with just being confident in the room. And
well, hold on. I mean, because it's one thing to be confident and comfortable. It's another thing for somebody to be coming to you with that stuff. What was the difference? You said, I hadn't really encountered that, but maybe you just weren't aware. And
possible, yeah.
Right. And
so nervous and concerned about like the music.
Right.
My first year and a half in the fitness industry, and then things change. Like you need to take time being in the trenches in order to pick up on the things that just go over your head when you're starting out. It's a lot more overwhelming. And I feel like when I was just saying with group fitness, it's like all you say is like 3, 2, 1, go. It's not just that. There's a lot of things that go into it, but what I will say is the personal training world and the group fitness world, they're a lot more different than people give them credit for. I've seen people in group fitness, myself included, where it's a struggle transitioning to PT, but I've seen the same thing where PTs, they struggle going into the group fitness.
Right.
They're both two very different places to be training clients.
Do you see a trend changing there in terms of the consumer's awareness of what you just said? Like prior to maybe COVID, or when they had access to these classes that they were going to, and that was being very beneficial for them in very many ways, whether it be physically, emotionally, psychologically, all of those things. But now not having access for one reason or another, either they've moved or they can't make it because of the schedule, because of their new at-home work schedule, or that facility they were going to isn't there anymore, or can't take as many people, or they've had to change their format, or all of those things. Do you see a trend changing in terms of the awareness of the consumer knowing the difference or seeking out something different now? And if you have, can you expand on that? What are they telling you? What are you seeing?
I definitely think more people are more open to private training at this point, because you don't have all the bells and whistles in group fitness studios. And even the places that are reopened, even if they don't have, it's all just changing so much. Like I know Equinox just put something out the other day where like you have to prove that you've been vaccinated before you can come into our group fitness studio.
Yeah, some crazy stuff happening there in New York right now.
Yeah. But I do think people are a lot more susceptible to being open to the one-on-one training experience, even virtually. I had this girl who was taking classes with me for about 2 years, and she didn't see any changes, but she just enjoyed being in class with me. And then when COVID hit, she was like, well, I guess like I'll do one-on-one with you if you're offering it. And now I've had her for over a year and a half, and she is by far the strongest kettlebell client I've had the privilege of training. To put it into perspective, a year ago, she could barely do a clean swing with 12 kilos. And she recently just completed the Sinister Challenge, which is where a female is doing single arm swings, 100 single arm swings in 5 minutes with 32 kilos.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But yeah, no, I think a lot more people are open to doing the one-on-one now because they want change.
Right. Yeah.
It's not to say you can't get it in a group fitness class, but if you have stuff customized to you, you're going to see better results.
Right. And you're avoiding the pitfalls or the hang-ups, and it's not that you're not going to feel hurt sometimes, or maybe you go through some kind of an injury process. I mean, that if you work out long enough and you're working out hard and you're really pushing, there's certainly risk for that, and that's going to happen. That's just part of the thing. But working with a coach that can help you through that, or with a coach that has a network of people that can help you through that, I think is what we're seeing right now too, is people are taking a little bit of, I'm just going to say, a little bit longer thought process and vetting out process. So in the world of business, the sales cycle is a little different than it used to be, because people are shopping around and they're not just, coming in with as many preconceived notions of, I just want to take classes. They want to know what's involved in the classes and why and how because we do offer group training here. It's small, 6 to 8 people is the max we'll put in any type of a group, but that allows us to be hands-on at some level. And there's an ability for us to assess and evaluate and then modify for those people that do just want the group classes for whatever the reasons they want those. The point of that is I'm seeing the same thing. I think people are really starting to think differently about their health. You mentioned your husband introducing you to fitness in a healthier way, right? Or getting you to look at it in a healthier way. And I think the term fitness now is being looked at in a little bit broader sense by the consumer. And I think that's what we need as an industry in order to overcome some of the stigmas and things that we've been wrestling with.
The other thing that's kind of interesting to even mention, Scott, is the fact that, before COVID, I didn't think having a virtual business was actually an option.
Me either. For me, I didn't want it. I was like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. Like, forget that business. No. I'm an in-person kind of guy. What a narrow mindset.
Well, I thought the same thing, but what was crazy is I really didn't spend any time on Instagram looking at people who did virtual stuff full time. Like, I thought they came from like rich families and it was like their hobby. And I think there's a lot more fitness professionals who are catching on and are like, oh, no. Like, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to get on social. I'm going to show, the world what my clients can do and get more people to give virtual training a shot. And I think more and more people are seeing people like us out there and realizing, maybe this is something that I want to try and invest in.
Yeah, I agree. And it starts with the professional feeling like they can get that done and get some wins and create that kind of an environment for their client, and get comfortable there first. I mean, the professional coach has to get comfortable with it first and figure out what the formula is for them in terms of achieving client success. And it goes well beyond a sales funnel on the website, or a click funnel, or an Instagram ad, or whatever the case is. And it started the power band, or that curve is starting to kind of meet, or that graph is starting to kind of level out. And you're obviously one of those people that has figured it out. So going, just kind of taking another step back, you mentioned getting into this class because you were encouraged to do so. Take somebody else's class, figure out these new techniques. What are the other people doing? How can you bring some of what they have into your class and give it a different spin? Yada, yada, yada. So you go into this class and you're encouraged in air quotes, to use more weight, right? Because that just makes sense, right? Like, you're not working out hard enough, so just grab a heavier load. That makes perfect sense, right? And then you do that and you wind up hurting, right? Whether you get injured or you're just, you're being overworked. It's an inappropriate load for whatever movement pattern you're using. You're finding, I'm sure at this point, you said you were very discouraged and disheartened, because you're not feeling well, but I imagine you're recognizing how quote unquote unstrong you are at this point, despite all the working out, all the fitness that you're participating in, cycling, other group exercise classes. Because here's the thing that we didn't mention at the beginning. I was hoping we would get to this point, which is, look, you're at this point, you've been published in several and recognized in several magazines and several publications. I mean, you've been in Cosmo, you've been in Self, you've been in Runner's World, you've been in New York Post, you've been on the Business Insider. I mean, you've been looked at as somewhat of an authority on this stuff, yet now you're being put into this environment where you're going, I'm so out of my league here. And so at some point, the strength training becomes a thing, and at some point the kettlebell is introduced. Is it after this class? Like where are we right now?
It's
okay. Okay.
So I finished this class and I decided I need to leave Equinox for a while. So I'm learning how to become a personal trainer, and I'm at this gym with my husband, and all the guys at this gym, it's very progressive. It's a lot of calisthenic work. Like they're doing flags, they're doing pistol squats, they're doing muscle ups. And I'm just like,
you're not doing that stuff.
I thought all that stuff was just magic. I was like, you can't actually do this stuff.
Right.
And that was also very discouraging, Scott. I lasted at his gym probably less than 6 months. And, I went around to a couple of other like small personal training studios, and I was still trying to find
the fit. Right.
Yeah. And this is even like an interesting thing talking about the business side of things. I mean, I've been in the fitness industry going on 8 years now, and I probably worked for close to, 14 companies within that time frame. So I've gotten around. Like, I know I met a lot of people to have clients, and those clients were still funneling in from years in the past. But I ended up going to a Lifetime Fitness. There's one in Manhattan. And that's the first time I'm juggling group fitness and personal training, and everything's awesome. And I loved it there. And I won, I know there was you were mentioning on your episode, there's performer.
Yeah, sure.
Right?
Yeah. And you're being recognized for something, and it's generally revenue, right? Because that's what's driving that's the company's agenda. But there's also, they kind of try to hide that in how many clients you've trained in the year or how many clients you actually have. But the reality at the end of the day, it's how much money did you make, right, for the company, right?
So I ended up getting the MVP award.
Yeah, great. Good for you. But yeah, and by the way, that's saying something. I'm not downplaying, because I was a performer too, and I was motivated by that stuff. You've mentioned some heavy hitters here. I mean, Equinox, Crunch, Lifetime. For those people in the business, particularly in New York, those are big hitters. So if you're a high level performer in those clubs in that type of environment, and by the way, you can walk out the door of any gym in New York City. You don't even have to throw a rock. You could kick a rock and hit the gym next door, because there's another one right across the street, and then there's a personal training studio, and everybody works with a coach there at some level, right? It's a group fitness so. Look, that not taking away. Congratulations, that's kind of a big deal. So you're MVP.
So I get this award, and then the GM comes up to me and is like, "Okay, we need you to stop doing so much hired at another boutique to help us more people."
Right. The next natural progression for that coach is to give him a management job to drive revenue somewhere, right?
I was furious, because I actually wanted a management position with Lifetime. And they were like, no, you need to continue to be in classes and on the floor for us. And you need to be on the floor at other boutiques. My general manager helped put together an application for me to audition for Rumble. It was very strange. And I was really upset by it. And I ended up leaving the company. Um, and as I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to go next, I see that Crunch happens to be looking for a studio manager for their new hit boutique called the Sweat Shed.
Mm-hmm.
So I go on the interview, and I'm interviewing for for this guy, and our conversation is going great. And he was like, well, just so you know, we're really trying to focus the studio around kettlebells. Do you know how to use kettlebells? And I was like, do I know how to use kettlebells?
Right.
Of course I do.
Right. Fake it till you make it, right?
I was faking it really, really hard. Anyways, I get the job, and so this boutique happens to, this is like an interesting concept to try and grasp. So inside of Crunch's flagship location in New York City, mm-hmm. you have the PT floor, and then you have another PT floor. Downstairs, there's a cycling studio, there's a group mm-hmm. fitness studio. But on a separate floor, there's this like great big dark room.
Right.
And it's the Sweat Shed. It's the studio.
Yeah, I think it did not used to be. I've been in that club. And so
I was there. They converted.
Okay. So usually those big rooms were like whatever the fresh new thing is, that's where we're going to put it, whether it's the cycling program or the, God, what was the one? It was built after the Total Gym. What were those machines called? Sort of like a heavy duty it's like a Pilates machine on steroids. We had those because I worked for Bally and we owned Crunch for a little while. We had some of that stuff, but I'm familiar with the club, and I'm also familiar with the resources that Crunch puts into personal training. They're still on the front end of making sure that they put the right amount of money into driving the right amount of revenue. So,
something else that my boss really cared about was making sure all of his personal trainers were either Strong First or RKC.
Yeah. Which is awesome. I mean, what an opportunity for you, right?
Incredible. Well, I mean, eventually it was incredible, but it was very humiliating to be, because I'm teaching like one of these classes and I'm supposed to be, the expert, and I have these trainers under me, like teaching these classes. And one of the trainers who ended up being my first coach, he came up to me and he was like, just so you know, we're all talking shit about you. Mm-hmm. No idea how to swing a kettlebell. And if you continue to do the stuff that you're doing to these people, somebody's going to get hurt, and we're not okay with it. And it really hurt.
Crossroads, got to make a decision now. What am I going to do?
So I was like, you know what? You're right. I need to learn. Will you teach me? And he was awesome. He was so awesome, and he taught me so much and got me prepped for my level 1 RKC certification, and like my life changed. And what's crazy is I wasn't trying to learn how to use kettlebells to change my body. Something else to keep in mind is once I was in this manager position, I realized I hate managing people. Mm-hmm. And I started drinking, and I started eating pizza on my train ride home, and I started gaining a bunch of weight. And it got to a point where I was just like, I'm done being super disciplined. Like everything as it related to counting calories and bulimia and over exercising. I hadn't done any of those things for like a couple years at this point. And all this weight just started piling on from the stress. Mm-hmm. And in just learning how to use these kettlebells, my body started changing aesthetically. And then I started to feel my abdominals for the first time, the surgeries from swings and farmer's holds. And there was never
you're on your feet. You're on your feet the entire time, and you're feeling your abs and your trunk and your quote unquote core more than you've ever felt it.
It was incredible. And I remember one day, his name was Brandon. He was like, go try a pull-up. And I was like, I can't do a pull-up. But I embarrassed myself. He was like, no, just get on the bar. Just try one. And I got my first pull-up. And that was something that when I was at my husband's gym, I was like, that's just magic. Like I could never do something like that. And the confidence that just came from, not even trying with these bells. Like I wasn't even trying to make a change. I was just trying to learn so I could teach somebody else how to do something safely. Mm-hmm. My world just got rocked. And it's really my mission to show other people that a lot can change if you just learn how to do a few foundational exercises well with a kettlebell.
Yeah, so that brings us to the kettlebell, the power of the kettlebell. A huge fan myself and huge advocate. We use them. We have probably, well, let's just say we have a solid selection of different types of kettlebells and all types of weight here at Red Dot, and we use them every day. Every client is going to have a kettlebell in their hand in one form or another for all different kinds of things. Going back to the having a virtual online business and or trying to provide a high level of coaching and one that provides a result for strength, endurance, mobility, fitness, the kettlebell probably rates right up there as one of the top 2 pieces of equipment you could probably own. And so I want to talk a little bit about kind of your experience, and you alluded to that. You kind of jumped in with the Strong First and the RKC because they coach a very specific type of lifting, right? Or kettlebell approach, right? The hardstyle approach, which is different than maybe the world of kettlebell sport, right? So there's some nuance. There's some nuance there. Now we're getting in your wheels. I can see your face lighting up because you're like, yes. Now we're going to talk about what I love talking about and how you explain it to a client, because what you see on Instagram or what you see on the interwebs or whatever else, or what you might see somebody doing in the gym when you're there working out. While kettlebells are very similar, the manner in which you use them or the application is different. So let's talk about this premise of the kettlebell, and I guess more specifically why it is so powerful, and in terms of changing physique, changing endurance, increasing strength, all of those things, maybe versus some of the other pieces of equipment out there. And for some people, this might be really remedial or not exciting, but
really exciting.
For me, it is. So I'm a nerd. So let's nerd out on this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think something, and again, I'm not a kettlebell sport athlete. So if anybody is a kettlebell sport athlete, feel free to be like, she has no idea. But from what I have gathered, a big component of kettlebell sport is it's very much endurance focused. Like their events, they have 10 minutes where they're not going to put the kettlebell down.
Right.
When it comes to hardstyle, it's all about creating tension and the power of breath to move very, very heavy weight. Mm-hmm. And we're not doing anything, for 10 minutes necessarily.
Then those are different. So those provide a different training effect.
Yeah.
So depending on the goal that you have, choosing one style over another has major implications on you achieving your goal or not. So the first thing you have to understand or establish is the goal, right? So don't mean to cut you off, but that's an important distinction to make before you hire a coach or purchase a program as a client, or even as a coach who has certain types of clients or is going to be working in a very specific environment. So I just want to make that point.
But yeah, so that's I think one of the biggest differences, because I have people ask, what's the difference between the different types of bells, like a competition bell that typically goes along with kettlebell sport, and just a regular old cast iron bell is what we utilize for hardstyle.
I think you're making. I don't mean to interrupt your thought there, but you're making a good point about the equipment too now. So, in kettlebell sport, you're using a kettlebell that's exactly the same size, right? It has the same diameter, same handles, everything, whether it's a 4 kilo kettlebell or a 32 kilo kettlebell, it's the same. So the look and the feel of it is exactly the same versus when you're in the sport bells, or the cast iron bells, those things grow as the weight gets bigger, right? Or as the weight gets heavier, which changes the dynamic.
Also, it's interested, even just looking at that is, I don't know how much time, you or our listeners are on social media, but something that's like super popular right now is, kettlebell flows.
Yep.
And it can be very misleading because a lot of the very fancy flows I see are done with competition bells, and they all look the same. You don't actually know what and a lot of the times they're a lot lighter.
Can be deceiving.
People who can like flip bells. I've seen dudes like flip 40 kilos, and it's like kind of insane.
Right.
But
it can be deceiving.
Yes, it can be deceiving. It's
a lot. It's like watching somebody do a barbell clean, and they've got 50. That's an exaggeration. Maybe 10 kilo or 10 pound rubber bumpers on there. They all look the same, but the reality of that is you don't know how much weight that person's really lifting. So it can't be deceptive for the beginner or the user that's unaware, for sure.
A lot of time I find a lot of people who are like, oh, Colleen, I really want to get into these kettlebell flows. Like, let's do it. And I'm just like, I would.
Right. But
flowing with kettlebells, but like
right.
What so-and-so is doing is, with a very light weight, that's really not going to make a whole lot of change. And I think there's a lot of benefits to doing flows, specifically hand-eye coordination.
Mm-hmm.
But I really do think if you're trying to get strong, following a specific style, be it, hard style or be it kettlebell sport, like one or the other is probably going to give you a lot more bang for your buck than just getting taken away by the fanciness of flows. The flows are probably the equivalent to like a soul cycle.
Yeah, gotcha. It's a supplement, right? It's a supplement to whatever it is that you're doing, in your programming. It shouldn't be the basis for your strength, your strength and endurance program. So let's go back to this concept of the hardstyle kettlebell training. There are some very specific things around hardstyle, and one of the things obviously is there's a lot of things that everything kind of comes from the hinge, the swing, the swing, and there's and while this exists also in kettlebell sport, how you do it is different. So it's not, the kettlebell might look the same, right? It might be the same weight, but how you're doing it is very different. How you're breathing is very different with hardstyle versus sport. You really are training for speed and power, right? And hardstyle, versus your kettlebell or your kettlebell sport, you're training for more endurance. So these are some very specific things that are different. You already mentioned, like, you're using enough load to where in a 30 to 60 second set within your hardstyle program, you should want to put that thing down. You should have to put it down.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be able to continue versus the 10-minute intervals that you see in the kettlebell sport. Well, again, there could be some argument. Maybe you should put that down. You shouldn't keep going in that contest. The point being here is you're using enough load to, really fatigue out and have a need, be necessary to put that kettlebell down, or at least transition into a different movement that isn't going to be as intense, or maybe potentially set you up for poor biomechanics or so forth. So on those premises alone, when I'm looking at hardstyle versus kettlebell sport, both of them are different. They both use a similar piece of equipment. They're different and they produce a different training effect. Will you get power and strength from kettlebell sport? Absolutely. Right? Absolutely. Right? Will you get endurance from hardstyle? 1,000%. But if I'm trying to maximize the time that I have and the equipment that I might have, which typically with kettlebells, when we're looking at that, like I'm looking in the background there, you've got a full set, probably doubles of each. That's not realistic for probably most of your clients, no? So how do you set them up for success? When somebody's walking into and there's a lot of questions I have here, but let's talk about the equipment. So if somebody's getting started on a program with you, or on a kettlebell program period, and we're looking to build strength, power, endurance, maybe lose a little fat, change aesthetically, how many kettlebells do they need? How much weight do they need? Where do they even start? Because this shit ain't cheap now, Colleen. It's like $3 to $5 a pound, right? And then you got to pay freight to get it to the house if you can find what you're looking for. It's crazy. So what do you recommend?
I typically, if somebody's on a budget, I encourage them to get 2 different size kettlebells. Now, this can vary if somebody is extremely deconditioned. But I typically encourage my clients to start off with their testing size bell, which is a bell that is recommended between RKC, strong for the hardstyle world, based on your age, your gender, and your weight, and then get a kettlebell that's 8 kilos heavier. The way I typically start people up is really focusing on a lot of, I guess people would say like basic moves, but just starting off a lot with farmer's holds and racked holds and deadlifting and things where like it's okay that the weight is going to feel very heavy right now. Like I don't typically start anybody off with a kettlebell over their head within their first month.
Right. I mean, people want to get right into snatching, right, and overhead pressing and all the fancy stuff you can do, all the sexy stuff. The reality of it is it's just like anything else, right? You have to build a foundation. So you're not doing that right away. So you don't need a bunch of kettlebells to get started to do the basics that you just mentioned. And by the way, that formula and the sort of the recommendations, I guess is more the appropriate term, that the hardstyle world has come up with. And I will be honest, when I first started with kettlebells and I got into it and started to discover, I was very uneasy with that kind of a recommendation because it seems very general. However, my experience has showed me that it's very accurate. It does a very good job at setting somebody up for success. So while simple, it's effective.
Yeah. I think something also to keep in mind is I've had multiple people, especially over this past year, where I give them the weights that they need. And they're like, are you sure? Like, this seems really heavy. But I don't think a lot of people realize that when you're starting off with this stuff, to your point of before, like we're not starting off with snatching. We're not starting off with pressing over our head. Like we have to develop the foundation. And those weight recommendations really are a great way to build a foundation with traditional hardstyle exercises.
Right. Right. And I think, those are also exercises people are going to find success with really quickly. Yeah. Right. They're the basic movement patterns, right? There's hinging, there's squatting, goblet squatting, things like these are the things that you need to be doing that most people are going to feel comfortable with at some level. And quite frankly, sometimes those are the most appropriate types of hinges and squats that we would be handing or instructing a client to do in the beginning stages of their program. So getting that kettlebell in their hand, getting them comfortable with it, as well as getting a certain training effect with it, it makes sense. So you've got your kettlebells in your hands now. As a coach and as a client, what are kind of the things that people are the most challenged with when they first start? And I think I already mentioned one of them, which is they want to get right into the sexy shit right away. It's like, hold on, let's pump the brakes a second here. And we're not going there. But what are the other things?
Understanding tension and breath are a really challenging thing to get across to people. And all of my first sessions, I give everybody a towel and I ask them to just rip the towel apart so they can start to, and this typically is a harder thing for my ladies, not to be sexist, but if you ask most ladies who do not have a strength training background, engage your lats, like they
have no idea what that means.
Yeah.
There's no connection there.
Yeah. And the only reason I'm saying typically like guys are a little bit more aware is, even if you're not doing a lot of strength training, I bet you've done a pull up, which is something that a lot of ladies, until we start training, it's not something that typically.
Right. Cause it's magic.
It's magic. So understanding how to create tension and breath are really challenging because it doesn't seem like, well, why do you need to create tension? Why do you need to breathe a specific way in order to make these things happen until you're doing it and you can't figure it out.
You know what I find is interesting with that? Because I've experienced that as well, is these same ladies, and again, not being sexist, just this has been my experience, my lived experience here and professional experience, that these are the same ladies that will walk into a yoga class and not think twice about the breathing that they go through their different postures and movements, that to a general strength athlete, particularly us males, would walk into the yoga class and listen to and see this going on, and that sounds and looks ridiculous. Why would I ever do that, right? But once you get in there and you start doing it, you recognize the benefits and the importance of doing that as a strength athlete. I was a closet yogi there for a while. Some of the best, felt the best and performed the best I ever had when I was doing that on a regular basis alongside my other training. But the vice versa of the female coming in from maybe more of the group exercise, yoga, Pilates type of an environment, and then walking into the strength training environment, particularly with kettlebells. And by the way, breathing is important whether you're using kettlebells or not. But then getting them to kind of feel comfortable with the breathing techniques. And for anybody that's really watched and listened to hardstyle kettlebell work, breathing is huge, and you can hear it for the person that's performing that. And it might sound or seem or look even a little bit awkward for and off-putting for the person that's never done it before. But if you don't get comfortable doing that right away, it just makes everything else that much harder. So breathing and bracing technique, sort of going in right away and really getting your arms around that. What else from like the coach client perspective is hard sometimes to get rolling with or get on board with?
I really do think that the tension and the breath are the two biggest things. One of the main ballistic that most people do is going to be the swing, regardless of if they progress to single arm work or cleaning or snatching. And I've had a couple people who take to it like this, but most people, they struggle with the swing because anybody can pick up a kettlebell the same way anybody can cook an egg.
Right.
And in order to do it very well, or to, make eggs the same way you would at like a fancy culinary school, like there's a bunch of little details that are involved. And, in order to swing big bells and not feel your low back, there's a lot of things you have to think about. Tension being a thing, breath being a thing, timing being a thing, understanding the hip hinge. And most people,
they're disassociated. They don't understand that movement pattern yet. Yep.
Yeah. So that is always a little bit of a challenging thing to teach to somebody starting out. But, once that stuff clicks, magic really does occur in this sport.
Right. So once you've got that confidence and you built that strength and you built that technique to where it starts to become more automatic, then because you've practiced it, it's less of the practice, it's more automatic, then you can start moving into some of these other types of movement patterns. I think I see one of the biggest mistakes made, and we've talked about sort of the sexy movements, and that's not fair to really categorize them that way. They're all sexy. But particularly with swings, cleans, snatches, the clean and the snatch being, kind of the pinnacle, right? That's where we're really moving to with the kettlebell as far as the sexy factor goes, is getting into it too soon without having a strong foundation, because there's some very obvious things that happen. First off, it looks very awkward and you're going to feel silly doing it, right? Secondly, you're going to get banged up. Right? If you're trying to do this stuff without the strength, without the technique, without the breathing and the awareness, you're going to get banged up. Those kettlebells, there's a rotational component that's going on there with a mass that's not soft. So it's very unforgiving. And so when you leave a class from a coach who inappropriately has had the whole class trying to clean, where there isn't a basic proficiency, and they all walk out of there like, oh my God, the back end of my forearm or my wrist is smashed, or, I've got bruises on my chest or my shoulder from, trying to decelerate the kettlebell with my chest cavity instead of managing those forces. That's when people get discouraged. So you coaches out there that are doing this shit, stop it, because you're ruining it for everybody. There is a way to do this correctly and introduce people to the kettlebells, in a way that gives them success and keeps them from getting beat up. And I think you've articulated some of that stuff. And it's hard to do in a classroom environment.
It is. Before everything happened with COVID, I was actually teaching a kettlebell class so I ended up going back to Equinox eventually. And I was teaching a kettlebell class, and we capped the class at 12 people. Mm-hmm. And, this was at one of the smaller locations in the city. And it was very much a handful of members that I knew, that I was telling them, like, I'm going to start doing this class, like, make sure you sign up.
Right, and they're in. Yeah.
And for about a year, it was just the same
people. Yeah. So
we could progress. But, starting out, it's definitely not easy to teach people how to do it in a group setting. So I do a group kettlebell class at this point virtually, but it's something where you have to test out into it. So
you progressed into it.
You like need to have already worked with some type of a RKC or a Strong First coach, or you need to be one of my clients who wants to go into the group setting, but it's not something where, all right, I'm really like, I want to do snatches. I'm going to sign up for class today. Like you have to earn your way into class.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's, so we have a couple of classes. We're actually working on a project right now to bring a higher level of kettlebell coaching to the clients from a small group perspective, much like what you're doing here, where there will be more of a curriculum. I'm really excited about it. We'll be talking about that more in the future. Maybe we can get Colleen involved with that a little bit. But with our buddy Mike Salemi, and but we currently do have classes that predominantly use the kettlebell as a piece of as a modality, but we're not doing the dynamic movements. We're coaching things like the hinge, or, from the deadlift, the squat. We're using it in ways that don't include these more dynamic movements. And we're also using other equipment so we can incorporate other things that it's not appropriate for that client or that class attendee to be trying to accomplish with the kettlebell. If you want more instruction, you need to get more instruction before we would move into something at a higher level. So it's not that you can't use. I'm not saying, I want to be really clear here. I'm not saying that coaches that are using kettlebells in a class situation where they may have 30 people in there are wrong. Not saying that at all. I'm just saying you need to choose wisely as a coach in terms of your programming, how you're going to introduce those things and what specific movements you may be using, because you mentioned you capped it at 12. Well, that's potentially 24 kettlebells moving all at one time, and they're independent of one another. There's a lot that can go wrong. And as a coach, really, it is impossible. It's impossible to keep your eye on everybody with everything they're doing at every time, no matter how good an instructor you are when you're doing these types of movements. So going back to that classroom environment and that progression, you've nailed it. And that kind of, in my mind, that kind of takes us into the next piece, which is we talked about the group situation. Let's talk about what you're doing with your business now in terms of who's coming to you, how they're finding you, and is the kettlebell why they're coming to you? Like, look, this lady's a badass and I want to learn from her, or is it, no, I feel more connected to her as a coach. I know she used the kettlebell. This seems like something cool I could try, but even if she was using a barbell, I would do it anyway. What can you tell us about that?
Well, before I say that, I do want to backtrack for a second. One of the reasons why I'm always going to stand by, you're going to get your testing size bell and something 8 kilos heavier, is you can't bullshit your way through
right
snatch with your testing size bell.
Right.
Most people, they're like, you want me to snatch how much weight? Like, I can't do that. Yeah, you need to learn. You need
right.
the strength. But come time where when you actually are ready for that, you should be able to do that.
Right, because you're not lifting a kettlebell above your head. You're snatching it above your head, right? And there's components to that. Yeah, got you.
But in terms of the business stuff, so it's interesting. When COVID started, none of my private training clients were kettlebell focused. I had a bunch of, I'm just going to be point blank. I had like a bunch of older men who just wanted like a cute little female trainer.
Mm-hmm. It's part of the game, right?
Yeah. Those were my private clients. And I was averaging about 12 group fitness classes a week, one of them being a kettlebell class and the rest were cycling or HIIT. And then I was also a virtual trainer on Equinox's platform. So I was juggling a bunch of different things and only 1 hour of my week was actually focused around kettlebells. Mm. So when COVID hit, that first week I was like, I have to do all of my classes just like on Instagram. So I was, doing HIIT classes and kettlebell classes in my living room. I turned my bathroom into a cycling studio. And I was like, after the first month, I was just like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And I hired a business coach. And I remember she asked me, who do you want to help? And I was like, I want to help everyone. Like,
Right.
help everyone.
Seems like the right answer, right?
Yeah. And she was like, nope, you got to niche down. So she gave us this assignment where we had to figure out, like, well, who is the ideal client? And I came up with my ideal client, and it's a little bit swayed, but I can say at this point I get to train close to 20 of my ideal client every week, and I do it all with kettlebells. And most of the people that I train, I did not know until COVID, and they found me through Instagram. Some have been from Equinox, some have been from Lifetime and that studio with my husband, and people just like are coming out of the woodwork because we can be together. Mm-hmm. And I think everybody has just really seen how passionate I am about the kettlebells. And even though I was only training one class with kettlebells, since I got that first RKC certification, I want to say three years ago. I think I've been using kettlebells for about 4 years at this point. Mm-hmm. That's how I train. I don't use other modalities at this point. I'm now just getting started with playing with barbells, but like it's a very early stage. Like we're not doing anything on social media at this point. But I think people have been seeing how much they've changed me and how passionate I am about it, so that they're more open to wanting to try kettlebells. It's rare that I've had anybody. Not want to go down the kettlebell route with me. I've had a few people, and honestly, like they don't last with me because I'm not passionate about teaching other things at this point.
It's not the right client for you, right?
Yeah.
It's not the right client for you.
I know so many other incredible trainers that can help people do different things, but I'm really here to, help women specifically get strong and master hardstyle kettlebell technique.
So let's talk about that, because I think that's the huge thing, going all the way back to the beginning and talking about sort of where you've come from through your journey and your history, and that, you are an incredibly strong, physically, obviously, mentally and emotionally, you've been, sort of forged along this path. And the kettlebell has been sort of the strength catalyst from a physical perspective to help you get there. And let's be honest, it's unconventional. It just doesn't, it flies in the face of what a lot of people see or relate fitness as being. If I want to be ripped, if I want to have great shoulders and arms and abs and a butt and all this other stuff, well, then I have to do all these different exercises using these different machines, these different modalities, these different classes, and all these kind of things. How do you tell somebody or show somebody what the capability of a kettlebell is, or the kettlebells are as a modality in terms of achieving these very commonly sought after goals, mainly aesthetics and strength? I think more people are asking for strength. I know I need to be stronger. And that one almost is like, okay, well, conventional wisdom says if I pick heavy shit up, I'm going to get a little stronger. But let's go to the aesthetics piece, because it isn't sexy, and you don't see Instagram, gym bunny who's posting pictures of her ass all day long, spending all day with the kettlebell, right? There's a lot of hip thrusts in there. There's a lot of elastic bands. There's a lot of stuff. Not to take anything away from those movements, but you're not seeing them do it with the kettlebell. So what gives?
In terms of actually showing people the aesthetic change?
Yeah.
I have yet to be able. The first couple of clients I got who were open to kettlebells, the goal was not an aesthetic change. The goal was just, how do I use this because I can't be in class with you? Mm-hmm. And I have this one client. If you're listening to this, like, go to my Instagram and go search for everything I post about Sophia, because she is such a freaking rock star. But I asked her to take pictures, and 3 months down the road, I asked her to take another set of pictures, and then another set, and then another set. And she started seeing a change, and she knows that we didn't change anything based on diet.
Right.
We just changed her workouts. We didn't change anything else. And that girl looks like a totally different person.
Mhm.
But honestly, I think in terms of my business, a lot of my clients have seen success from other clients that I've had who were just willing to take a chance.
Put in the work. Yeah.
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 Because I don't really talk too much about aesthetics with them. And I think that really comes from a place of, for so long, I just wanted to be skinny. And for me, like, my mission isn't to get you skinny. My mission is to get you strong. And I think something that really excites people is, I post about client success a lot, but if you go into my highlights, you'll see my 13-week course called Swing to Snatch. And I get people snatching their testing size kettlebell well within 13 weeks of never touching a kettlebell before. I get people doing loaded Turkish get-ups with their testing size kettlebell well in 6 weeks. And I think when people can see, oh my gosh, like, look at these strength gains, and like, these people look good, that's what gives them like the trust to take a leap.
I was hoping you would answer like that. I knew you would. I was hoping you would, that it's not about aesthetics, that focus for you as a coach. If people put in the work and they do the work, they're going to see some kind of an aesthetic change. Obviously, diet, lifestyle play major roles in that. We're not gonna take away, but don't choose the kettlebell to get skinny. Don't choose the kettlebell to get ripped. Don't choose the kettlebell to achieve maximal strength. Choose the kettlebell because it's an awesome tool to help you achieve a healthier, more vibrant lifestyle, where the byproducts are going to be increased strength, right? Increased capacity, increased mobility, sense of well-being, confidence, and all those things. It's just a tool, right?
Really do come from kettlebells. I mean,
Absolutely.
but it's what's so interesting, even for my personal story, is, my goal wasn't to change my body with kettlebells.
Right.
To learn how to do these things, and the change occurred.
Right. People, I just see so many times people choose a piece of equipment, a Peloton bike, a Pilates machine, a rowing machine, or whatever, with an expected outcome of what that's going to do for them from an aesthetic perspective. And I never see those things really have the kind of impact that people really want them to have at the point where they decided that that's the thing. The opposite being for kettlebells, I think it's the bigger surprise that people have. Like, I had no idea how effective this piece of equipment could be at achieving strength gains, endurance gains, capacity gains, and aesthetic changes, all in one. And again, you can do it on a budget. You can do it in the comfort of your own home. You can do it on the road. You can do it, in the gym. It's such a utilitarian piece of equipment. Again, I think the utility there is just amazing. And from an unconventional perspective, I think that's what's intriguing. I think that's what pulls people to it. But at the same time, it's not easy. So you really do need, some programming and not some. You need some organized, intelligent programming to get you where you want to go. So you mentioned your program there in terms of, I think it's 13 weeks to the kettlebell snatch. Maybe walk us through kind of what a client or somebody should expect in this 13 weeks with working with you.
Yeah, I mean, I call it an intensive because it is freaking intense. There are 4 required workouts that you're doing a week. There's an optional team workout where you're getting live coaching from me. There's a technique call that happens once a week where I'm literally asking, Bobby Sue, hop up, show me your swing. Okay, we need to change the down phase. Go grab a resistance band. Try it this way. Did it feel different? What did you feel? It's a lot of workshopping that's going on back and forth. And then they take that into their next workout. They record their workouts, like clips of their workouts, and then submit them into a private Facebook group. And I'm very nitpicky with all of those athletes for them to be able to see improvement into their next workout. And that's basically what happens over the course of 13 weeks. And I bring in guest coaches as well between mindset, nutrition, cycle syncing. I mean, that's like a whole other thing I would love to, bring to people's attention. Yeah. Not aware that comes into this course, and people see a big a big change in 13 weeks. We're capable of a lot when we put in the hard work.
Right. I mean, the two biggest things being commitment and consistency. And if, like most things in life, you want to get good at something, you have to have both. I mean, obviously, if you're trying to get better at basketball, but you're out on the tennis court, you're probably not going to get much better at basketball and your free throws and your jump shot and whatever the things are. So if you really want to learn, you really have to make a commitment to this to a piece of equipment, right? And knowing that 4 workouts a week is designed for a very specific reason. That doesn't mean you're comboing that with your 7 days a week of cycling and you right?
It's hysterical, Scott, because
Right.
I've had people who are like, I've never touched a kettlebell before. You know, I'm in somewhat good shape. Like, I want in. I had this one person who honestly should not have been in the course, but they just like begged to be accepted. And they were probably one of the most successful athletes to date. But I've had a bunch who are just like, well, can I just like do this in
right?
you?
Yeah. Can I stack?
I'm doing.
Yeah. Can I stack the Orange Theory on top of the Soul Cycle on top of the kettlebell program?
And I tell them, you know, like, so long as you're getting your stuff done, sure, let's see how long it's going to last. And then, you know, after week 3, they're just like, oh,
yeah, right.
Anymore.
Right. And again, I think that's a head, or that's a mindset that somebody needs to be, needs and wants to get into. And it's very hard. I think that goes back to my question before, like, what are some of the harder things to get somebody, going, is the commitment to, and the understanding that, look, this is not an easy thing to do. It may look easy, and watching Colleen do it on her Instagram, but she's not doing. There's steps to this process, and you don't need to swing the kettlebell. And I say swing, but you don't need to work out 7 days a week to get great results, to see an aesthetic change, to do all these things. If you're got smart, organized, programming that's being applied properly. So. One of the things that I haven't actually seen your programming, but I have seen you on other digital programs, right? Whether it be through Equinox or, through Daily Burn. So this is not something that you've just kind of come up with. And because we see, and I think this is another thing to talk about here, is how you're delivering the program. And you just walked us through that. There's a lot that goes into that. I don't want to minimize any of that. So the videos and the things that you're showing people and the instructions that you're giving people, you didn't just wake up, on whatever it was, March 17th, 2020, and decide, oh, I'm just going to shoot some videos in my living room. You have some experience in production, right? And being part of putting together bigger programs. And I think that's an important distinction to make here in terms of what you're delivering as a coach versus what other coaches are trying to deliver. And they're trying to learn that part of the business and that part of the process and that part of how are they going to scale themselves while trying to deliver good programming. And ultimately, it's very hard to do. You mentioned you hired a coach. You hired great coaches have great coaches because you recognized you needed to do things, differently in order to be successful here. The quality of the content you're providing is something to be talked about. So my hat's off to you, because the production value, right? The actual content in and of itself, and mixed in with some of the more raw kind of video testimonials and things like that. That's an art. I think you're doing a really good job at that. So any listener or any coach that's looking to build programming, like what Colleen is doing around anything, whether it be the kettlebell or anything else, I think she's a great example, and would be a fantastic place for a new client who's looking to explore, particularly a female client that's looking to explore getting stronger, feeling better about themselves, building confidence, maybe changing aesthetically a little bit, and just having some fun. Colleen's definitely the person to check out first, rather than how a lot of people have gotten to us over the years as a business at Red Dot would be, they've been through the ringer. They've tried a lot of different things. They've been down the path. They've been disappointed. They've had promises made that couldn't be kept. The value of what they thought they were getting really was not what it was. Again, if it sounds like I'm pitching Colleen, I definitely am pitching Colleen. So.
I really do appreciate it. It was very scary, hiring a business coach. I'm 28. And hiring a business coach was the biggest investment other than college I made in myself. And it was the best thing. I invested $5,000 in a business coach for 3 months in a group container. Mm-hmm. And not including my private clients, the first time I launched Swing to Snatch, I made $24,000. And I think it really just goes to show, like, when you do choose to make an investment in yourself, so long as like you're on that ship and you're consistent, like you will get it back in tenfold.
Right. The ROI is all about what you put into it. You have to make smart decisions, right? And smart investment decisions. But just like any type of investment, you have to be committed, and you have to put in the work. So, again, a lesson for any entrepreneur, any business coach, and any client out there is, look, you get what you put in, but at the same time, buyer beware. So I think I just prefaced that a little bit. So, Colleen, you've mentioned a bunch about the Instagram and what's going on. You've got a website as well. Where do people find you if they want to learn more about your programs? They want to talk to you, maybe engage you a little bit, or just test the water even. How do they do that?
Yeah, I love hanging out on Instagram. So if you follow me, my handle is I am Colleen Conlon. If you want to check out some of my programs and whatnot, you're more than welcome to visit my website, which is www.colleenconlon.com.
That's awesome. So you heard it there. Colleen, I want to thank you again for spending time with me, and thank you for taking time away from your clients. So I'm going to thank your clients for allowing us to have the time today to chat, and the wisdom and knowledge you've shared. I hope, and I know that our listeners are going to take a lot out of this. So if you're a parent out there, if you're a lady, if you've got young ladies in your life, and you're looking to get them on some type of a strength program, and it's particularly from the comfort of their own home, and you want to try something different, go check out Colleen. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Iron Sights. If you enjoyed our conversation, you can support our mission by hitting the subscribe button, leaving a review, and sharing the podcast with a friend. I'll see you on the next episode.